How's it going, NPC Nation, and welcome back to a brand new video. In this video, we're going to be talking about, by the way, spoilers ahead before we get into the topic, is what I think should be next for in the what I think should be next in the Spider-Man games, or what I think should be next after Marvel's Spider-Man 2. So, Marvel Spider-Man 2 came out on October 20th, and I officially 100%ed it a few days ago. Oh, now that it is 100%, and some things have been revealed, and if you watched all the way and didn't skip any cutscenes, and you watched the end credits scene, you would know that the next Spider Person to be revealed was Silk. Her name is Silk. I can't think of her name, but the character that they revealed, the girl that they revealed, is supposed to be Silk. A lot of things are revealed if you 100% the game. Spider-Man 2099, Miguel O'Hara with the Spider Bots. Carnage, which is the Flame missions. If you did the Flame missions, Carnage was in it. If you finish the Eyes in the Sky mission, the unidentified target missions, the Chameleon, who is Craven's brother, I did not know that, was in it. The Green Goblin was at the end. They mentioned the Goblin Serum, the G Serum, with Doc Ock. Norman and Doc Ock are, I think, going to team up and stuff like that. Well, we all know that Insomniac's next title is going to be Wolverine. That has been confirmed. But after focusing on Wolverine, I think they're going to go back and try to focus on some more Spider-Man and some other games. For a while. I don't think they're going to focus on Spider-Man right after Wolverine. I think they're going to go to Spider-Man after the next at least 2 or 3 titles. But this is what I think should happen. First, we should get a Miles 2. People say we don't need a Miles 2. Miles Morales 1 gave us more Miles. If we don't have a Miles 2, I think we should get a Silk game. If we don't get a Silk DLC for this new game, for Marvel Spider-Man 2, I think we should get a Silk background story. People think she shouldn't get her own game. She wasn't in the game long enough. Blah, blah, blah. Miles was in Spider-Man 1. That's why he got his own game. I think they did that because they wanted to surprise us with a new spider hero. And there's theories that Peter retired at the end of Spider-Man 2. I don't think he's retiring. Let's go on my 3 things that I think should happen after this game, where the next games should go into when they get into Spider-Man 3. First, the Silk character. I think Silk, if she doesn't get her own game, her and Miles should team up in Miles Morales 2. If they decide to make a Miles Morales 2. A lot of people say we don't need a Miles Morales 2, or we don't need one because of Miles 1, and because we know a bunch of his backstory now. Well, how would you develop a character that you only put in for 5 seconds in the game? I think developing her with other Spider-Man, a younger Spider-Man that's her around the same age, Miles and her, I think that would be a great developmental cycle for her if she's not in this Spider-Man 2 DLC. If there is a Spider-Man 2 DLC or New Game Plus, which people believe that there is going to be, because Spider-Man 1 had DLC and New Game Plus. So, I think after all the DLC and New Game Plus, if we don't get more developmental, DLC for Silk, we don't play as Silk at all, or, see Silk in Spider-Man 2 DLC. This is what we should do. I think they should just drop a Silk game. The reason being, hear me out. The reason being, yeah, she wasn't barely in Spider-Man 2. At the end, she was. But it gets people reading the Silk comics. You release Silk, it gets the newer people to read the Silk comics if they haven't, or people to search up Silk and what she does and her origins and all that stuff. And I think we should get a Silk game from her. I think it should be a prequel to Spider-Man 2, where it's before she comes to New York. Or if it's not a prequel, it should be her own, game where it's a developmental game for her. If not, make a Miles Morales 2. So you can play as both her and Miles. Like you did Peter and Miles in Spider-Man 2. So we can have her getting trained and developed and stuff like that. Second thing that I think they should do, if they don't do a Miles 2 or Silk game, is I think the villains that were introduced at the end or during side missions of Spider-Man 2 will be in Spider-Man 3, or if we do get a Miles 2, in Miles 2. Carnage. There's a Carnage suit as Miles in Spider-Man 2. The Flame being Carnage, okay, keep that going. If the Flame is still Carnage, keep that going until, because they have mentioned him, until you get to Cole Cassidy. I mean, not Cole Cassidy, Cletus. That's Overwatch. Cletus Cassidy. The actual Carnage. Until you get there. If you want to continue with the Flame being Carnage, make it into DLC for Spider-Man 2, or put him in Miles 2 or the Silk game. If we do get any of that, I'll explain more. The Chameleon, put him in Spider-Man 3. Put him in Spider-Man 3, him and Doc Ock and Norman team up. They team up, Green Goblin, Doc Ock, and Chameleon. I think they could develop him more, Chameleon, in between game, because Spider-Man 2 had an in between game, which was Miles. That's to develop Miles. So back to what I said about the Silk game. I think Silk should get her own game. Yes, she was barely in Spider-Man 2. She was only in it at the end. But I think Silk should get her own game where it's her own character, where it's developed, and Miles is basically training her and helping her out. Or we do get a Miles Morales 2 where we play as Miles and Silk. Would it make sense to play as Silk and Miles Morales 2? But I think Silk shouldn't just show up in 3. I think Silk should get an in-between game. If it's not Miles 2, it should be her own game where it is a prequel, where it shows her up until that point, just for the beginning of the game. Shows her up, you get to play as her as a prequel until just the beginning, and then the middle is her now in New York with Peter and Miles, being trained with Peter and Miles. That's how you can do a Silk game, is a prequel before she moves to New York, where she comes from, before she moves to New York, and then middle of the game is New York City with Peter and Miles, or Peter is teaching her how to be a superhero. I think Peter should be the teachable guy, and Miles should pass that on. I think Miles should train her because Miles is young as well, was young when he got his powers, and she is young in the Spider-Man 2 game. Third, before we get to Spider-Man 3, would be the DLC. Who would we have in DLC? What would be the DLC? I never played the DLC for Spider-Man 1. I heard it was very good. But I think if we get a DLC, develop Chameleon's character more. I think Chameleon should be the main DLC bad guy, because he is introduced, him and Carnage. I think Carnage should be saved, though. We know the Flame has Carnage. We know he has the Carnage symbiote. We know this. But I do think Cletus Cassidy should become Carnage. And eventually, also, Flash Thompson. We need to show Flash Thompson. We've mentioned him so many times. I think eventually Peter transfers the anti-venom, his DNA, some of his blood to Flash Thompson, so he becomes, Soldier Venom, or he becomes the Soldier Venom that we all know, not Anti-Venom, which is Peter. In this universe, I think he should be the Soldier Venom. I think Flash Thompson should be eventually introduced. If it's not in Spider-Man 2 DLC, I think he should be eventually introduced kind of as a bad guy, turns into a good guy in Miles 2 or the Silk game. But those are my 3 things that I think we should have. And I think we should develop Chameleon more. I think we should save Carnage to be part of the main cast of bad guys of Spider-Man 3, but we should develop him more as a DLC character in Spider-Man 2, or in Miles 2, or the Silk video game. I think they should go with a Silk video game more than Miles 2. Miles 2 would be great, but I think Silk video game where it starts out before she comes to New York, she has her powers, and then she's learning to be a superhero. It could be A, a prequel before she comes to New York, she still has her powers, or B, where she's learning to be a superhero in the Silk video game. Because she can learn from Miles. Or the concept of Miles 2, where it's Spider-Man 2, where you get to play as Silk and Miles. I think it should be one of those 2 things where she's getting trained, or it's a prequel before she moves to New York. And she's already trained by someone else. But I think she should learn how to be a superhero in her own game. Where the beginning could be a prequel, and then the middle and the end is all current time where she's being trained by Peter or Miles. Or in Miles 2, like I said, 2 playable characters. Which wouldn't make as much sense. But I think that's what they should do to develop the characters they introduced. I think the Flame as Carnage will be okay, and then eventually Carnage decides to leave the Flame. He's just had enough. They actually have a breakup. He leaves the Flame and lands on Cletus Cassidy. And him and Cletus Cassidy bond, and we actually have the Carnage that we know and love. And I think eventually, in this, if I think they are going to make DLC for Spider-Man 2, that we get more developmental character work for, if we don't get a Silk video game or Miles 2 with Silk, I think Silk should be a developmental character in the DLC of Spider-Man 2, the Chameleon and Carnage. And that's my opinion what they should do next after Spider-Man 2. By the way, spoilers, like I said. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, press the share button, press the like button, press the red shiny subscribe button, press the bell so you're notified every time I upload a video, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.